Big corporate rebrands are a tricky business. They can run the gamut from being the second coming or a reinvention of an existing brand to some solid meme material. For the most part, they're a simple refresh or a sidestep instead of anything brand new. But some are so baffling you can't help but ask why it was even made. And this is the case with Uber and their ill-fated 2016 rebrand. After a scathing reception and a series of horrific PR blunders, it was snapped from existence in just over 2 years. Uber really needs no introduction, which could be down to their market dominance, or bad business moves, misleading their drivers, pissing off regulators, employee exploitation. I'm not going to list all of the many issues here, so here's a list of 49 of them. Before 2016, Uber's brand felt cold and quite generic, with lots of dark colours and techie graphics. It felt like the opposite to its main competitor, Lyft. Like most startups, they grew rapidly without figuring out what the company or brand really stood for, and a new brand was needed to help modernise everything and update the many dated logos, but mostly to distract from all of these. The whole rebrand was designed in-house, with the inspiration for the icon coming from one of the CEO's blog posts from 2013. In the post, the software of Uber is represented by bits and the people are represented by atoms. The rebrand was guided by this overly pretentious idea. My first thought behind the icon is it could represent the destination, with a reference to the bit from the blog post being the square in the centre. The icon is an odd choice, as the app is how consumers recognise and use Uber's service, but the new icon feels abstract and cryptic. The old U icon wasn't great, but at the very least, U for Uber makes sense. The icon is caught in this awkward middle ground, where it's too simple to feel memorable, but too abstract for you to associate it with Uber. Not to mention, it looks like the letter C, but backwards. The logo type suffers from almost the opposite issue, despite being an improvement, as this feels generic and quite dated, but in a completely different style to the icon. I find this disconnect is something of a running theme throughout the whole brand. The brand was designed to be flexible, so it included bespoke colour schemes and patterns for each region, and this is one of my pet peeves with modern branding, which is the overabundance of colours. Instead of picking one or two colours and trying to own them, we see dozens, with very few complementing one another and some even clashing, and Uber took this to a ridiculous level. If the number of colours and patterns wasn't overkill enough, this image of the brand should help to sum up the issue. While there are some good aspects to the brand, there's this overall lack of consistency, with some elements feeling entirely disconnected, like they're for different companies. Like the icon and logo type, the idea of bits and atoms isn't communicated effectively or carried through to the rest of the brand, and feels lost. The fallout was fairly unanimous. In short, it was a head-scratcher, with many trying to discern what the icon even meant. There were attempts made to salvage the icon by simplifying it, and the simplified version is way better in my opinion, but the damage was already done. Creating the brand took over 2 years, and this took around for less than 3. Following yet more PR blunders, in 2018, Uber went into full damage control with a new rebrand, this time by Wolf Ollins, and crucially, wasn't made in-house. The new logo was the very definition of playing it safe. It's so bland it almost makes me miss the 2016 icon. The rollout included a simplified colour palette, bespoke sans serif font, fancy 3D renders, with one big downgrade being the illustration style, which now feels extra corporate despite some good execution. By far the highlight was the flexible identity system, which used this square U frame that housed different imagery, colours and videos. It was a simple and effective way to roll out the brand, and makes everything feel consistent. You're not going to find any patterns or colour schemes for Ireland here. In hindsight, it would have been cool to see this U shape incorporated into the app icon somehow. It feels like a brand made to please the CEO, like it was designed in a vacuum and disconnected from the very people who use the service the most. Instead of addressing their many issues or tapping into what makes Uber unique, it's all based off this fluffy, self-congratulating blog post. Watching the 2016 video, Uber explains the atoms represent the people we serve, highlighting how Uber puts people first, but it doesn't mention its own employees or the drivers, who are integral to keeping the service moving. Despite the 2018 refresh, I wouldn't say the brand is stronger now more than ever, and the company is still suffering from the same issues that have seemingly always plagued them. This botched rebrand is just a footnote on a long list of Uber's checkered history, and is by no means the worst thing to come out of the company. Ultimately, it feels like a missed opportunity. It could have been a fresh start, or a chance to show how the company had changed. Instead, Uber sees itself as God's gift, aiming to brush its employee exploitation and horrible working environment under the rug. Thankfully, it didn't work, and no one bought it.